Welcome back, everybody. Excited to get another podcast under our belt. Thank you, Smacks. Jay, how you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you, James. How are you doing? It feels like a long time since we've done one of these.
It has been. Yeah, you've changed your facial hair since then.
I have, yeah. I've sprouted a moustache in aid of November and got rid of the beard, and I shaved it off, and then everyone says I don't look 22 and that I look a lot older and stuff like that. And I shaved it off, and I went, where's this double chin come from? Because I didn't have a double chin when I grew the beard, and then so it's been a bit of an adjusting. And I came down the club on Saturday, and people double look you and go, oh it's you, like where's the rest of you gone, sort of thing. And you get
the best part of you gone.
Yeah, the best part of me. It's definitely a bit of a character thing now. So yeah, living life with a very cold face, warm upper lip, but very cold face.
You look good for it.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And our guest today is Alex Powell. Alex, how are you?
Very well, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. Very excited.
Absolute pleasure. Just so everybody knows, Alex Powell, degree in sports and exercise science, just finishing her sports psychology. Apologies for that noise. Sports psychology training. Founder of the Achieving Mind, which if anybody wants to go to, it's you can find that on www.theachievingmind.co.uk. And also she's a mental health and wellbeing coach, as well as a former Wasps and Exeter Chief rugby player. Does that about cover you as a title?
I think so, just about, yeah.
Well, it's lovely to have you on the program anyway. Really looking forward to getting to talk to you, especially around the psychology side of things. But I think we'll kick off with a bit of a warm-up, as we do. Some fantastic rugby, international rugby has been being played. I did put a note down, seeing as we all became slight Italy fans off of the back of the Six Nations, that beating Samoa and then Australia and then facing South Africa this weekend is going to be a real interesting test for them.
Italy by 50, surely.
Let's hope. And of course, the Red Roses lost to the Black Ferns in the World Cup. All congratulations to the Black Ferns. What an incredible team, but devastating for the Red Roses to they put in such an effort. Just in those last few minutes, it was so tantalizingly close.
Yeah, I saw Alex the week before, and it was the day of the semi-final, and we were surprised actually how close Canada came to the Red Roses and stuff like that, and then woke up super early. I was absolutely buzzing for this because I had the exact same feeling on Saturday that I did in 2019 in this very clubhouse. I was so unbelievably arrogant that we were going to win in 2019 and on Saturday. And I was just, thinking about, obviously it'd be great for them, but the knock-on effect of what it will do for the Red Roses to win a World Cup. And I found it was quite tough actually. You sort of see like the interview with Sarah Hunter after the game and that, and you feel yourself welling up and that, and you feel for them massively because not everybody thought they were going to do it and do it very, very easily. It was that sort of feel to it, and it didn't even cross my mind once that we'd not win. And you can analyze the hell out of that game, and I actually I'm going to do a bit of for my coaching award, a bit of a piece around the game and sort of analyze it and stuff. And there's some big moments in that game, and actually I sort of like had to check myself a bit because at the final whistle I went, my God, how did they lose that? They were so close, and if this had happened, if that had happened. But then actually you got to remember they were playing the majority of that game with 14 players. And to actually come that close in a World Cup final against New Zealand with 14 players is actually an achievement in itself. Especially in a key position on the wing, because no matter what people say, you look at without a shadow of a doubt, if everything had happened other than the red card, England would have won that game because New Zealand scored 2 really good tries in the hole where the defender should have been. It was tough result for them, but that's sport, isn't it? And I really liked Sarah Hunter's interview after the game and the stuff she was saying, and that I was really massively impressed with it.
It was real, wasn't it? That the post raw. I think the fact that she started the interview with "It's gutted," a lot of respect for her just saying exactly how she felt and had the courage to do so. And like you said, Jay, I think the fact that for over an hour of the fixture, they cope with that adversity of going 14 players down is phenomenal. And I think even prior to that, they lost 3 dominant players. The 9 front row, Helena Rowland. So I think also reflecting on it personally, that was testament as to how much depth and quality obviously within the squad as well, that they could then adjust accordingly.
Alex, if you were coach, would you have taken Sarah Hunter off at half time?
That's why I don't coach, Jay. I guess, at that point, he, in terms of each player bringing something different, a different strength, a different quality, he felt that time it was the right decision.
Yeah.
And Emily Scarrett obviously went in to then be captain with a whole magnitude of experience, and they wanted to change their dynamic. And we're talking 3 points. It could have gone either way, like you said, James, in that last minute.
Yeah, literally, if it hadn't been for that that final line out not going the way they wanted to, we'd have been having a completely different conversation and saying what genius to take Sarah Hunter off and manage to survive that and win with it's. But like you say, it's the way sports go. But fair play to them, fair play to the Black Ferns, who just a staggering team. Really are a staggering team.
And actually, like some of the interviews with, I watched all the after-match stuff and the match reaction and that. And, you've got a lot of people, that were quite like, a lot of the pundits were quite emotional and stuff like that. And it was quite hard hitting for everybody. But then you sort of flip it and you listen to some of the interviews that some of the Kiwi girls gave and stuff like that. It was just, for them, like, it was very hard not to feel very happy for them because, it meant so much to them. But also, like, I think you've had your go. You've won it like 6 times. And
hey, 2025, Jay.
I know. This is the thing, isn't it? And it was a great game, great spectacle. And a lot of people and what was great as well, that will grow the game massively, obviously in a sort of like overall sort of sense. Maybe not as a direct result of, you look at the analyze it, what the RFU would have given to the female game if like it had gone our way and how much stuff they would have got out of it and the knock-on effect of winning a World Cup in the money sort of sense. Let's be honest, the game is not in a great place at the moment. The knock-on effect of that was the bit that hit me hard, was like, that could have done a lot of good. A lot of good. But it is what it is, and we can analyse it. There's nothing we can do about it now.
Also, Jay, like you said, it was a spectacle. What an exciting game from start to finish. Everyone was absolutely hooked, captivated, and you mentioned in terms of the impact moving forwards, the amount of young girls and girls maybe who've hung up the boots who are then inspired to get back into it is amazing. And things such as, for the first time, bus stops, the posters in bus stops.
Yes,
of being how powerful and how, that we talk about things becoming a dream, you can't be it unless you see it. That's everyone now seeing female rugby players all around the country and it being real and not being a dream to be a professional. It's happening.
With regards to the money, you were saying obviously the money coming at the club, the men's game premiership struggling at the moment, as we know. Obviously you were at Wasps for a while. They're going through their trying to do their best to try and keep the club afloat, but the women's side at Wasps been separated from that. Have you heard how that's surviving? Are they struggling, or is it that different that they're actually doing okay? To
be completely transparent, I'm not entirely sure, James. Like you did say that they are unfortunately separate in terms of sort of the funding and the financial support. And I do know that Wasps Women did have support sort of in place. In terms of how things are currently and the nitty gritty, I'm not aware of. All we can do is hope. And it's a phenomenal club. I was there six seasons, and it's a huge part of a lot of people's lives and identity. So hopefully that support and those resources are in place to help the women moving forwards.
I think then we crack on our first half. As everybody that listens in knows, the first half is basically just getting to know you some more, Alex. As I say, your professional life at the moment is linked, perhaps led on from your playing career. But before Wasps, where did rugby start for you?
So actually, I didn't get into rugby until I was about 22. It was actually quite late. But to be honest with you, James, sport has always been a part of my life, ever since tiny tot, and loads of different sports, hockey, cross country, squash. I did a lot of windsurfing back in the day. And so
nice.
I went to Exeter Uni. There was a phenomenal windsurfing club, and did quite a lot of competing in the student network at the time. And then that led on to actually some sort of commercial sponsorship, and ended up competing on the British Wave Tour. But in 2012, ended up losing a bit of a cat's life and ended up getting rescued by the RLLI, which, looking back in hindsight, I should have absolutely gone to go and see a sports psychologist, because that was like a really exciting time in my sort of windsurfing career. And funny enough, getting caught out in pretty much a hurricane and having to get rescued didn't do wonders for the old confidence. So that took quite some time and work to kind of regain that confidence and get back on the water. And then I guess, in terms of when I started playing rugby, started actually after quite a difficult personal life event. I'd always wanted to play rugby. I just never had the opportunity, sort of growing up and in school and everything, until I was at university.
Is that because of no clubs, or just because?
At the time, really, really limited. I was sort of in Somerset, and obviously now it was Grays. Obviously that's completely changed, but I didn't have access until I was at uni for the first time. And I lived with Amber Reed, who has obviously got a number of caps for England, and she'd always said, Alex, you really need to give it a go. And then in 2013, I completely unexpectedly lost my mum. She had a underlying heart disease, which we never knew about. And that's when I started playing rugby. And so I've always personally sort of described my rugby journey as being that lighthouse of hope, because during an incredibly difficult time in my life, it gave that direction, it gave that focus. And we know that, when it comes to grief, there's a whole magnitude of different emotions. There's pain, denial, anger. And for me, rugby was a way of harnessing that all and using it as a constructive fuel, is probably how I'd say it. So 2013, age 22, that's when the good old rugby journey started, really.
Wow. And what university was that at?
That was Exeter.
Exeter Uni,
yeah. And the program was phenomenal. Joe Yack, who then went on to be under 20s head coach and Worcester Warriors women's head coach, so supportive and was very, very grateful for her sort of vision and her encouragement and support when I started up, as well as the sort of facilities at the university really helped facilitate and harness people's potential, which definitely made a difference.
So where did you get picked up then by Wasps?
So I somehow, from picking the rugby ball up for the first time, fast track 7 months, ended up getting invited to go into sort of divisional setups. At the time, it was sort of North, Midlands, Southwest, Southeast. Had no idea what I was doing, to be totally honest with you, but ended up going to the camp and loved it. And for some bizarre reason, they invited me to go back to the next one. So that was for the first season. Moved out to Australia just to kind of reform with my dad and sister after obviously everything had happened to my mum. And I was out there for about 7 months, and I had this real itch at the back of my head to be like, I really wonder where the rugby could go. And I came back, and that's when I then joined Wasps in 2015. And I think I've been playing at Wasps for a season, and that's when England's sort of national academy then sort of approached me and invited me to go to the Canada camp. So that sense of.
And what position were you playing?
Second row, always through and through.
Best position.
Yeah.
Best position. 6 foot and pretty lanky. Didn't have much choice in that one.
Yeah.
I'm 6 foot and pretty lanky myself. Well, just over. Maybe not so lanky.
I think I'm what am I now? 6'6".
Yeah.
Yeah, and phenomenal number 8. Just
absolutely.
Yeah, just do so.
You've grown. I think you've grown a few inches since I saw you last. Then.
No.
Maybe it's the facial hair.
It was
just grown a foot.
So, how did the Canada camp go for you then?
Oh, what an amazing experience, blimey! I tell you what, and the amount of lessons learned were incredible, and I think I was quite realistic with myself at the time to know that my knowledge was quite limited in playing just over 3 seasons. So it was really important. I kind of focused on the things which I knew I was bringing to the party, so to speak. Learned a lot about anxiety myself and how it manifests. Yeah. I remember, blimey, we were in camp, and vividly that breakfast of the first game, those waves of nausea were coming through, and having to say to myself, Alex, you've got to eat this because otherwise you're going to have no fuel to go and play later. And it was amazing just to be in that elite environment. And I realized at that level of sport, I absolutely loved. And that pressure, the expectations, and that's why I then wanted to push and sort of move on from that. And I think the next of 3 seasons or so was sort of involved in some of the Six Nations squads, and was fortunate enough to play against Spain and South Africa. And interestingly, there was a chap who delivered a sports psychology session. And I remember thinking, God, this is so interesting. But some of the others thinking it was kind of like drying paint. And I remember thinking, this is so captivating, but it could be delivered in such a way which is really interactive. And at that time, I was working in sports events, and it was really challenging trying to balance sporting training commitments alongside being at skiing and snowboarding events, which I was doing as a career. It wasn't sustainable. And the rugby was taking number 1 priority. And that's when I thought, hang on a second, going from events to sports psychology and pursuing that is where I want to go.
So you weren't studying it when you started playing rugby then?
No, so absolutely not. So when I first started playing rugby, I was working in sports events. And then as my sort of rugby journey grew, my interest in sports psychology kind of grew alongside it as well. And then 2016, 2017, I then decided to go back and start my training as a sports psychologist. And things were moving. Things were really, really exciting in terms of the rugby. I've been involved in the sort of England academy for about 3 seasons or so. And we had a camp against South Africa in 2017. And unfortunately, probably like the most prosperous time. Then had a whopping great knee injury and completely blew out ACL, MCL and meniscus. So that threw a bit of a spanner in the old works.
Ooh.
Ouch.
Yeah, not too fun.
Touch wood, that is my biggest fear is a knee injury. It is my biggest fear. When I was like playing at school, this lad's leg went in a ruck, and it literally sounded like someone had been shot. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm really, really hope I never ever have a knee injury. But then everything from the hip up. I destroyed my body in the upper bit, but I've broken my ankle once, but that's it. But honestly, fair play to you for coming back from something like that, because that's a big old injury. So how long did it take you to recover from that?
It was, to be exact, 451 days. Not that I was counting or anything.
And how helpful, how did you do it then? Was it in a tackle or?
You won't guess this one, but it was in a line out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So shot up, got the ball, came down and got sacked. And
wow.
And basically my foot just didn't leave the ground. And the hardest thing was, as I remember it, and my poor dad must have been about 5 meters away, so we saw everything. And I got carried into the medical room. And the doctor who looked at it said, I think it's okay. And there was this moment, and I was lying on the bed, and I think, right, Alex, you've got a phenomenal opportunity here, and you need to make the most out of it. Are you jeopardizing that, or have you actually really, really hurt yourself? And I remember standing up and thinking, why on earth is the medical room floor not flat? Of course it was flat. It's just I had no knee stability. And the physio then came in and she said, yeah, absolutely, it just ballooned. She said, Alex, you've got to lie down, you need to go to hospital. And then funny enough, it wasn't okay.
Surgery? Yeah,
so hamstring graft from my perfectly fine leg, actually. So I've got matching scars, but because it was so scarred and thickened, I had to take my graft from my other leg.
Yeah. So Sam Cloud has had that done as well. He's had his
oh really?
He replaced with his hamstring as well. So it's quite a big one. But so then what was next for you after the injury when you recovered?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was in the sense that I'd obviously restarted my training as a sports psychologist. I think was a bit of a saving grace, to be honest with you, because what I then, in terms of going through that year and 2 months, what I then did is place all my focus on my qualifications and my education, and definitely having that as an outlet. So all those traits which all rugby players possess in terms of competitiveness and drive and determination, I just flung it at my degrees and became an absolute geek. But, in terms of resilience, there's a chap called Dr. Mustafa Sarkar, who has done loads of research around resilience. And one of the things he says to help develop resilience is personal development. So skills and competencies away from the sporting setting. And then actually during that year, and then come 2018 is then when I then launched the Achieving Mind. And so there was this kind of like transition already starting there from sort of playing to now we're kind of like looking at a slightly different role within rugby. And that is then just grown and grown since 2018, really.
2018, you founded the Achieving Mind.
Yes, that's right.
Wow.
And that's really good.
Tell us about that. So for somebody who's never heard about the stuff that you've done with the Achieving Mind and that, tell us everything.
Tell us. No pressure, hey. So the Achieving Mind is a sports psychology consultancy business. So very simply put, as a sports psychologist, it is our role to help optimize athletes' well-being and performance. So we look at lots of different psychological factors which might be impacting both well-being and performance. We'll look at the links between emotions, thoughts, behavior, all within that sporting context. And simply put, optimal performance, if you just focus on the physical, the tactical, technical aspects of sports and you neglect the mental side, you're not going to thrive. You're not going to optimize your performance. So that's where this role of sports psychology comes into place. And just through the Achieving Mind, we'll work with clubs, work with athletes on a one-to-one basis, parents, coaches, charities.
Yeah.
Quite a broad spectrum.
Wow. Okay. So, and then when you're like working with somebody, how long is that sort of program? Is it, is it 6 weeks? Is it for as long as they need, or?
It's a really good question, Jay. To be honest with you, it completely depends on what the athletes or the client's needs are. That's kind of how I work. Very sort of flexible around that, because as people, we need different things at different times in our lives, don't we? It depends. If we've been working with a club, sometimes we'll put a program in place at different times of a season, but on a one-to-one basis, it depends if they got tournaments or competitions coming up. Depends on their availability. So it's really
how much of it is people seeking you out, or clubs and organizations saying, Alex, we've got this, we've got player X, they really need some help?
It's a mixture. And what I've definitely noticed, which is great, especially obviously within the rugby land, is that clubs obviously now really valuing the impact which sports psychology can have for their clubs. So there's so many more clubs now which are employing sports psychologists or encouraging their athletes to engage with that form of support. And there's that great quote from Dan Carter, which I think, if I remember correctly, goes along the lines of, when he first started playing, that if someone went to a sports psychologist, there was something wrong. Now, if you're not going to a sports psychologist, there's something wrong.
Yeah, which is great, which is really, really, really great.
We had, on our last podcast, we had Professor Adam Nicol, who's a sports psychologist. And he said that he'd come up against resistance from coaches to get sports psychologists involved. Is that something you've experienced?
I think people's understanding and view towards sports psychology is very, very different. So if it's met with question marks or a bit of hostility, brilliant. How exciting is an opportunity to then explain to someone the benefits and the huge amount of impact it can have on someone. And there's a big shift, isn't there, which we're seeing in relation to understanding mental health, well-being, psychological support, and it's certainly heading in the right mood, sort of direction. But there are misconceptions and there are different beliefs around that, and that's part of our roles to help spread the word and spread the understanding of sports psychology.
That's really interesting, because you work a lot with the NHS as well, don't you?
Yeah. So when I moved down to Exeter in 2020, started playing for Chiefs, and I then got a job in the NHS working in a mental health crisis team as a psychological practitioner. So I was there sort of 2 years or so, and then the last 7 months started a new role as a mental health and wellbeing coach, it's been phenomenal, and it's all about supporting people, sort of addressing wellbeing needs, but taking proactive steps forward in that sense of self-management, learning, developing our coping techniques, our toolkit, so to speak, and people having the time and space to be able to explore that and be supported in doing so. And it's all transferable. They're all things which we can use on a rugby pitch and in day-to-day life. I've got a big sort of approach towards that, most certainly.
And because you've played it, because how long were you at Exeter for? Season 2?
So it was my final season of playing. So 2020 to 2021. Yeah.
And how was that? The transition from Wasps to Exeter, everywhere's different, as we know, clubs wise. Moving into somewhere, starting a new career, helping the NHS at a new club, was that an easy transition for you to go through? Was it something that was exciting for you? Did it help you, or?
It was incredibly exciting, and in different ways. I had an amazing time at Wasps, like 6 incredible seasons, loads of great memories. At the time, obviously 2020 was with the pandemic, and I had to be honest with myself in the type of environment where I was going to be happiest and wanted to live. I'm obviously a bit of a water baby, and London is, despite the lovely Thames, not particularly close to the sea.
Much windsurfing to be done in the Thames.
Yeah, not too great, hey. And fortunately was given the opportunity to have a contract at Chiefs, and it was very, very obviously different. Chiefs did an amazing thing at having players from all around the world, which is very, very special. So everyone was bringing their own sort of vision and their own culture in. It was really, felt very grateful to be part of that inaugural season. to be helping kind of navigate that new club. It was the first time obviously women's section had been integrated within Chiefs, and the support from the men was amazing.
Yeah,
it was really good. And the promotion of the women's game, the men's coaches coming doing some specialist sessions with us as well, things such as social media, it all adds up and it all makes a difference in terms of exposure. I think the challenge I found personally is the way in which the women's game was going and the expectations and what was needed to be delivered on, such as training, nutrition, your analysis, you name it. My journey in terms of the NHS and sports psychology was going in such an exciting direction that it didn't allow me necessarily the time to be able to commit to rugby, which I'd be able to do and I wanted to do previously. So I had to have that quite challenging, honest conversation with myself. And I think what probably planted the seed was in the crisis team, I do night shifts for 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. And this donut thought it'd be appropriate to finish 2 weeks of nights and then go and try and train that evening. Well, you can probably only imagine how well that went, and snap goes a hip flexor. So
oh no.
Yeah, that wasn't too cool. But it was a bit of a tipping point to think, actually, how sustainable is this? I'm having to be honest with myself. And I think, like I said earlier on, I absolutely loved playing at that level.
Yeah.
That's why I was playing, and I couldn't give it what it needed because I was investing that energy and commitment in a new exciting chapter in my life.
Yes.
And so it was a bit of sort of acceptance around that.
Was that a positive feeling, or did you struggle with that?
I think a bit of both, James. I knew it was the right thing for me. Don't get me wrong. Every time I see a game of rugby, I always think, I can still be playing. God, I miss those games. I miss, like the post-match celebrations with your mates. I miss the tackles out of everything and the line-outs. But it was the right time. And I kind of had said I wanted to end on a high. And I felt very, very fortunate and grateful that I could end it on that note. Whereas a lot of people don't have that choice, through injury or various other things. And that was the difference. It was a choice. So I felt very empowered to make that decision.
Wow, that's good. That's really good.
So for someone that doesn't understand sort of the sort of like levels that you were at, so talk us through. So you were at uni, and then you were at a professional club, and then talk to us at what level you were then at with England and in the sort of scale of things.
Okay. So started off Exeter Uni. So that was within Bucks. So that's like it was at the top league of rugby within the university sort of setup. Then from that, it was divisional. So represented the southwest of England in that first season of playing. And then after that, then started playing Wasps, and that was the women's premiership. So highest level, obviously, of women's rugby in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Six seasons there, and then within my second season, then got invited to go into England National Academy, and then from there was a member of the Six Nations training squad for a couple sort of seasons, and sort of was in that sort of bracket, so to speak. And then from that squad, they were then selecting EPS, as it used to be called. So it was like a performance squad, and that's when bang, my knee went. And then once, like you said, sort of got back to playing, then was playing for Exeter Chiefs, which was then semi-professional in the women's top league again.
Cool, thank you. I think for girls that listen to this, and for people, it's a really good understanding to have of where you can go from, and actually that it's never too late. Like you said, you'd gone to university and that was the first time you'd gone and played rugby, that it is never ever too late. And I love that. So thank you. That's good clarity.
It is interesting though, because you speak to so many people today that that have played rugby. Youngsters played up through their 20s, and they kind of say, oh well, I'm 21, 22 now, so I'm going to kind of ease off, and I fully get it, because I think I played up till sort of mid 20s, broke my collarbone, and back in those days, there was no sick pay or anything like that, so I just couldn't afford to just have that chance of that happening again. I'm not talking at any particular level. This is just local club level. But to speak to someone like yourself that didn't start playing until their early 20s and still achieved something, it just shows what is achievable. And of course, then what's come on from that with your, the Achieve in Mind career, which, really, really cool.
Massively.
I think we'll talk a bit more about that in the second half. I think probably
100%.
quite a good point to stop on. But so halftime, we are obviously wanting to promote grassroots rugby all over. So if you have any announcements and you're listening and want your club announced, or trying to raise awareness, or get some support and sponsorship for youth and grassroots rugby, please give us a ring or an email or whatever on @BeMoreRugby or info@BeMoreRugby, or however you want to contact us. Get in touch. We'll be happy to promote. But this weekend is this half time today, as everybody can see, Jay is sporting his lovely new tash in aid of Movember. Jay, do you want to give us an idea as to where people can help sponsor your? I want to reference Baldrick Slug, but not many people listening will probably know what that means.
Yeah, sorry, who?
Yeah, exactly. So an old comment there.
So Movember this year for me is a big one for a lot of stuff that's happened to people close around me and stuff like that over the pandemic. So there's a real Movember are really working hard on the mental health sort of side of it this time. And for that, I am running 60k this November, and also going out this awesome tash. If you would like to donate to my Movember page or just Movember in general, you can actually click on the link in my Instagram bio, and my Instagram is jstokes6. Yeah, I think definitely should have done some prep for that. But we can. But if not, if you can't find my Instagram, please feel free to go and donate to anyone else that is doing Movember, because honestly, they do a lot of great work, and they desperately want to keep making a big difference. And I know how difficult and tight things are at the moment with the stuff that's going on in the world. So if you can't give money, just go and speak to people, raise awareness about it, and do good.
Desperately just trying to find your Instagram, J Stokes. Yeah, jstokes6.
jstokes6. Yeah,
there you go.
Should have gone with my heart. Well done, me.
Brilliant. Yeah, get behind it. What a great charity. So second half, Alex, this is where we like to talk to our guests about what you've got from rugby, how it's helped you in your personal lives. You've already touched on it in the first half. Really excited to find out a bit more about your Achieve in Mind stuff as well. But I'd like to start the second half off by asking you, what does rugby mean to you?
What does rugby mean to me? At one time, it was that lighthouse, which we spoke about, that lighthouse of hope. But I think the one thing which I'm sure many of us say is family. That's the word which brings to mind above everything. Family on and away from the pitch. Jay, you just mentioning about the hardship for people in the last few years in the pandemic, and the massive impact that's had in terms of loneliness and isolation. And I know personally that the clubhouse at Wasps for all those seasons, and the camaraderie with your teammates, it's connection. And that's such an important thing for so many people who play rugby and support rugby and the parents and the coaches and the friends who come and join. And so that's, in response to your question, I'd probably say it's family.
No, amazing. Great answer, that one. And to be honest with you, that comes up all the time on the podcast. Everybody talks about family. So no, really good. And you mentioned the Lighthouse of Hope. Can you elaborate a bit more? I know we all know what a lighthouse is, but can you talk us a bit more about why you use that phrase?
Yeah. I guess the kind of the meaning behind it for me is that, you know, within incredibly dark times where maybe you can't see a huge amount, that it was portraying that sense of light, which I wanted to head towards. And sometimes stories, metaphors, looking at things in that kind of lens can help bring things to life. And there were so many exciting, positive things which were happening within that environment that I wanted to work towards. And it kind of acted like that compass. It's a bit like values, and values being kind of described as lighthouses as well, in giving us that sense of direction, that sense of focus. And that can, you know, be hugely impactful when it comes to challenging times in life. And I think it just really instilled in me the power which sport, especially rugby, can have in all of us and all of our well-being.
No, I like that. I know I've looked into a lot about the positive emotion you get when you're traveling towards a goal or a purpose. The dopamine system that gives you that motivation to keep going. And like when you got the rugby ball and you can see the try line and you're going for it, there's the euphoria and it gives you that little bit more to keep going, even when you think the tanks are all dry, or or you can't make it, when you've got that something to aim for. And like you say, if I've got the timings right, you are actually going somewhere with your rugby career. You had goals within rugby at the time to achieve. So I love that. I love that a lot.
I like to say I scored a few tries, and my mates listen to that would absolutely laugh. I think, James, I must have scored about a handful of tries in 8 seasons of playing, but
I know as a second row that's not your priority, but
I was going to say,
no, I get it.
Alex, I want to speak to you a bit more about the and go a bit deeper into the psychological stuff of bouncing back from your injury, because there's a lot of lads that I play with, the lads that I coach, and people that I've worked with that have had an injury, and because rugby is literally everything to them, as they're only out there, have really, really massively struggled when that's taken away from them. Speaking from a personal experience, when I did my eye, I replaced playing with coaching. I genuinely don't know what I would have done if I hadn't replaced something with a like for like, because I would have really massively struggled. And I know, I notice a difference in myself, over the summer and stuff. It was a big part of why I started playing like league and stuff like that in the summer for the county giants and stuff, because I really need to be in that environment. To be honest with you, 365 days a year, I need to be in it all the time for myself. I know that's how I operate. What advice would you give to people, and what coping mechanisms would you give if say coaching wasn't an option, if there wasn't a replacement available? What can you do within your own mind to sort yourself out when you're struggling with an injury?
Yeah, I think it's, for starters, Jay, it's a really, really good question, because unfortunately, injury does happen in sport. I think it's something which you can focus on before it gets to that point. And you mentioned how the rugby club is hugely important to who you are as a person. And actually, I think we can all relate to having that really strong athletic identity, especially when it comes to rugby. I think what I tend to sort of advise and encourage within athletes is actually understanding that's a hugely important part of who you are, but also exploring other options and other interests in addition, so that if, like you said, a situation were to arise where you can't partake, you can't train, you can't play, which is so difficult, you've got other pots of interest or confidence or positive emotions experience, and that can be slowly worked on rather than it being reactive to the injury. But if we, go down to the line of what can you do following an injury, one, engaging with that support network, because it can be so isolating being injured.
Yeah.
Can't it? It's horrific. There's so many emotions which go with it when you come with injury. And I know that personally, there were two people when I was coming back from my knee injury who made a massive difference. One being Nolly, so like Danielle Waterman, and one being Giselle Mather, who was our coach at Wasps. And the reason why they had such a huge impact is because they'd both been there and they could relate. And so that sense of connection and support was so real and so profound. It made such a difference. And I think finding people who you can kind of be those rehab buddies with, or you can just have those honest conversations and feel safe to, really helps with still feeling part of that club or that team. If there aren't other sort of volunteering options or ways of being involved.
Do you think there's a sense when you can speak to somebody that understands what you're going through because they've got the experience there? Do you think there's a sense of, well, they've achieved it, they've got through, they've survived, there's no reason I can?
I mean, one of the when you look at self-efficacy, so our beliefs around being able to achieve a task and our ability to achieve tasks, one of the main sources of self-efficacy is vicarious experiences. So seeing others perform through sustained effort. So just like you said, James, when actually we see people who we can relate to, if that's a teammate, if that's someone of the same sex, for example, of a similar age, and for them putting in, persistency and hard work, and they then get back on the pitch, naturally, that then spikes your own belief that you can do that. So absolutely. Yeah.
That's cool. I know Jay knows my son, Daniel. He dislocated his hip at county trials 3 years right at the beginning of the pandemic. And was looking at, obviously he missed out on the county, was looking at quite a lot of rugby missed, and we then went into the pandemic and lockdown and all the rest of it, so he ended up kind of by default, everybody was in the same boat as he was. But his dedication to his physio, he was having a physio from a fantastic guy called Bennett Performance Clinics in Poole. I recommend anybody going and seeing him if you can. He was doing Zoom physio with him, and I was having to hold the phone whilst he was on the floor doing all his physio stuff, and Ben was just, I was just cameraman, if you like. But he was so dedicated. But I think it would have been more difficult for him if there hadn't been a pandemic and he'd have been going and watching everybody else go out and play rugby when he couldn't. Whereas actually the scenario was nobody could go and play rugby. So in the end, he missed 2 games of rugby. That was all. Through a I think it was 9 months recovery or whatever it was. But when you're in that situation and you stood on the sideline, and as you've been, do you think it's more difficult to watch everybody else playing and you can't, or do you think it's something that spurs you on to go and recover quicker? Or
it's how you use it, isn't it? And it's how you look at it. And it can go both ways. I remember vividly that we used to have, it was called the Big Swarm. So it was great. So it'd be like a local derby at Wasps. I remember there being like a tear in my eye when I was watching, supporting the girls. But I'd be lying if I said that it hurt and I want to be on the pitch. Of course I did. But I guess with mindset and the way looking at any form of challenge in life, it's using those setbacks to kind of fuel that motivation. How do we frame it? Do we see it as a challenge, or do we see it as a threat? Yeah. And actually, James, you mentioned just then about your son and the value and the impact of goal setting. And slightly sort of backtracking, Jade, to your question, there's so much benefit in, if you are out and have sustained an injury, spending the time to set some smarter goals. But then by doing so and working your way through them, again, it gives you that focus, but it helps lift your motivation, it helps lift your confidence. It encompasses everything when there's things which you can't control or out of your hands. So it's a good way of controlling on the controllables.
Interesting, because that's one of the things that I've always banged on to Daniel, my son, is about control, because as a youngster he probably still is a little bit too much energy, if you like, and it was going to London Irish DPP after me banging on to him about control for so long, and seeing on their DPP when they sat down and talked to them about through the trials, positive, passionate, relentless discipline. And he just looked at me as if to say, yeah, that's what it's about. It's about being in control of yourself and what you want to achieve. So when he was going through his rehab, I just kept on to him, this is about what you're in control of. You're not in control of anything else. People can go and play rugby. You might miss games, things will happen, but you're in control right now of as to what you can do to get yourself back again.
Mm-hmm. And help navigate yourself through that really challenging time. Yeah, absolutely.
So what advice would you have to youngsters that are thinking about getting into rugby, seeing as you got into it late?
Just get on with it. That's the exciting bit. The process of, I think the RFU have just launched where you can find your local rugby club.
Yes, yeah.
And what we touched upon it earlier on, but the great thing is they're popping up everywhere. I think especially following, the final last weekend, there's going to be even more locations now which think there's such potential to get a club going. So absolutely, don't even hesitate. Just find your local club, get a pair of boots, get a mouth guard, and just go and enjoy it. Because that's how you learn, is by getting on with it. And the lessons learned, the mistakes, that's all part of the wonderful game of rugby. That's how you're growing.
So what's the biggest lesson you've learned?
What's the biggest?
Through rugby.
Don't be offside. No high tackles. There are two which always happen. And learn the laws. Yeah, but low tackles and try and be onside, because it was a bit of a shocker for that one.
You definitely had me down as someone who likes to give away a penalty while competing in the air, a bit of an arm pull or.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't ever talk to Kate Alder. So she was our Wasps captain for many years, and I'd always get the raised eyebrow. But it was part of the game. It's the fun part of the game. It's the dark arts. Yeah. And second rows, we know all about that.
100%. How much time did you spend when you were at like Wasp and stuff like that? How much time would you spend working on like the sort of the mental side to the game, like you could argue that some of that perhaps the Red Roses could have done with a bit more looking around like the mental side of the game of on Saturday. Did you spend a lot of time looking at stuff like that, or was it very much just get out on the pitch? And
yeah, I mean, very quickly that in relation to the Red Roses, what is phenomenal, they did employ a sports psychologist sort of pre and during, so they've really started emphasizing that support in place. I think personally, if I was reflecting when I used to play, imagery was not my go-to.
Okay.
So I'd always, especially in the morning of a game, that's when I like visualizing, trying to use those sort of five senses to look at patterns, to look at movements, because that was one of the roles I had in terms of sort of calling the line out. And that had such an impact in terms of kind of focus and confidence before going into whatever fixture it was. And I think the really important thing in terms of sort of pre-performance routines, we're all very different. We're all wired in completely different ways, especially rugby players. So sometimes the most extroverted, loud, out there characters need downtime before playing. And the exciting part, especially when it comes to sports psychology, is finding out what actually works for you, because it is not one size fits all at all. And there's, in the build up, do you need certain techniques which are going to start activating you, sort of increasing those arousal motivation levels, or do you actually need to like relax because it's absolutely that creme de la creme of almost sort of tipping over the edge? I knew that I had to actually, I was quite quiet before because I needed to focus on my music. I needed to focus on what I did. And that's probably the quietest I'd ever be. But I learned that through kind of trial and error, really. And, you know, we've spoken a little bit about sort of metaphors and looking at things in a slightly different way. What's the thing which drives your performance? It's this.
Yeah.
You know, it's your mind. Without your mind, your body's not going to move, is it? That's the thing which is driving the car. So investing in that, developing those skills and abilities is only going to make that car drive faster or more powerful.
So within your rugby career, then, learning how to channel yourself or get yourself ready for games, has that given you ability to help other athletes when they're looking to, because I've got two sons, both so different, and they both approach their sports in completely different ways, and they're starting, I think, to understand what helps them and what supports them. But it's certainly been a journey that they've been on. Sounds like exactly the same journey that you've been on. But now in your position, how can you help others find what they need at the beginning of a game, or before a game, or before a whatever sport they're in?
I think, you know, in relation to my approach to support, and that's different for every sports psychologist or trainee sports psychologist. We all have strengths and we all have resources, but actually tapping into them and finding the time to already harness and utilize them, I think, is really important, because when it comes to any form of support, we all want to feel empowered, don't we? We all want to play an active role in our progression, if that's with our health, if that's with our performance. And so my kind of lens, should I say, or my sort of philosophy to support is being quite non-directive. So I might suggest things that might be a little bit more directive, but actually I want to support you in being able to identify what you're already using and develop that further. Because we live in such a fast-paced life. That actually, when do we stop and pause and reflect and identify these things? And then that's when we can start to bring in this focus of, you know, if you invest in this, it's only going to have benefits for your performance on the rugby pitch and well-being.
Absolutely. So, away from the rugby pitch, what do you hope people get from rugby? Now you've transitioned from rugby into your career, and I know what I get from rugby in my career, and Jay and I have spoken about this a lot, but what do you hope that people get from rugby that helps them in their personal lives and their professional lives?
God, there's so many things to answer that, isn't it? I don't know where to start. I think first and foremost, it's learning how to communicate and interact with others for a common, you know, purpose, a common goal, should I say. And I think that's a real skill to be able to do that effectively, and that massively translates to life, doesn't it? You know, whether that's at work, if that's at school, learning how to interact with others. But it helps, I guess, moving forward also in terms of your mindset, which I know we sort of touched upon in our conversation, and how you can translate that within sport into day-to-day living. You know, when it comes to rugby, especially, there are going to be setbacks, there is going to be challenges, but how do you look at that? You know, we know there's obviously a lot of discussion around sort of fixed growth mindset. We don't have either or, we actually have both, but we just tend to favor one over the other. And with mindset, the exciting part is it's not set, it's not fixed, and it's something which can grow, develop, and change with a willingness and understanding, you know, how to do so. And I guess the biggest sort of lesson learned from rugby to outside is how we deal with challenge, because that is within rugby. You know, how are we going to deal with these pressures, both physically and mentally? You know, we've touched upon injury. We've spoken about how to, you know, communicate with coaches and teammates. But at the end of the day, we're all humans. So all of those behaviors, thoughts, emotions, we can learn to hopefully sort of manage effectively in and out sport.
I talk to a lot of people and try to help them understand the same as rugby. Rugby doesn't get easier, but you can get better at it. You can learn to cope with it better. You can learn to get through better, and all of a sudden you can be achieving in it. And the same with life. Life's pretty tough. You know, some people think that they've got it easy, but actually it's got a tendency of coming in and, you know, knocking you back 20 feet without you even realizing it. And life, you can, it's not going to get easier, but you can get better at it with, like you say, with the right skills, help, support. And I think also to touch on the point you were saying there, influence from other people that you're on the right team with can naturally, because people that you admire, admiration's about wanting to emulate people. You see somebody you admire, you want to be like that person. So if you hang around with that person, or if you're on that team, or if you spend time with, you're going to start to develop in a way that the bits that you like about them. And I think as well with rugby, like you were saying, there's always going to be times where you just, with your rehab, there's a couple of people there that really helped you through. Maybe they didn't even know that they helped you that much, but they really helped you through just from being there and understanding.
You know, you're a product of the people you spend the most time with, don't you? And that's why it's, I work with, offenders that, aren't bad people, but have hung around with bad people and have been influenced by bad people and have ended up, in society's mind, having they think they are bad people. And then because other people think it, they think they are. And that's a big thing that we've been, working with, is that you need to choose very carefully who you spend your time with, and you need to choose very carefully who you interact with, because you are a product of your environment. And that's something that recently, I've become very, very, very interested in, is actually, without realizing it, how much, you influence other people by spending, time with them and stuff like that. And that's why, in my opinion, coming down to like someone like a rugby club is so much better than anywhere else, because you're around decent people that are all of, of a very, very pro-social sort of mind, a very like, get out there, communicate with the people, talk about things when it gets, difficult. You're going out, you're doing a very physical, demanding sport, and it's something like that. And it's that big thing that I look at, and there's so many great people, not necessarily players. You look at someone like Smacks, who has had a massive impact on me as a person, and also lots of other people as well. The bloke's never played a minute of rugby, but the sport attracts those sort of people because it's sort of like a hub for everybody. So, it's a big, it's one of the big things that we do at the charity, Alex, as you know, is that, we want to get lads into rugby clubs and stuff, because they're going to be automatically straight away around decent people that are going to really massively help them. And it's that psychological side of it of, like you were saying then, James, if you admire somebody and you think that's a really good way, the more time you spend with them, chances are their habits are going to rub off on you. You're going to end up like that, which is a really, really positive thing.
Yeah. And you mentioned something just then, Jay, about the fact of, being able to identify what's important to you as a person and who you should be surrounding yourself with and by. And you made me think about how rugby really helps instill the value of values, pun intended, within people, and understanding it, and understanding how actually, aligning with those values, which we know in rugby the RFU got their own values, a lot of rugby clubs have got values, the impact that can have, and actually then living a life, in alignment with those. And, we talk about purpose and we talk about meaning, but actually in order to be able to connect that and understand what that is for you, knowing what those values for you, what's important to you is really helpful.
I like that.
Yeah.
Just while I think about it, because you mentioned Smacks being still the greatest first guest we've ever had on the show, is now a granddad. So congratulations to Smacks. He'll be pleased we mentioned him on podcast anyway.
100%.
And thank you again, Smacks, for opening up for us so that we can record the podcast here at Wimborne. But yeah, moving on. What would you say? And this is a pretty broad question, which we kind of probably covered anyway. But what have you learned specifically from rugby that you use most of all today in your daily life?
I heard a saying the other day, which I think massively resonated. And I think looking back at rugby and maybe how I played and what my mindset was and bring it to is just dogged determination. And I think if I'm honest, that's how I wanted to play. And that is then sort of translated across to training with the Achieving Mind and sort of work, which, Jay, you and me have been doing. And actually it's that dogged determination because it's something I'm very, very passionate and is really important to me.
I love that. We've had other answers very, very similar to that.
Yes.
Never say die. It's not over till it's over. All those sort of things.
Yeah.
Look at the England at the World Cup just on the weekend. They just kept going and they can hold their head up high because of that dogged determination. If they'd have given up 5 minutes beforehand because they were behind and just couldn't see that they were going to beat the Black Ferns, then that's different. But yeah, that's a great thing to take from rugby and use every day. I like that. Thank you for that. I think mindful of the time, probably think about wrapping it up.
Yeah.
But thank you ever so much, Alex. It's been a real joy to have you on board on the podcast. And just to cool down, just to go over the things that's really sort of struck me through our conversation is, again, very early on in our conversation, you went back to this idea of family and rugby being a family, and a lighthouse. We've talked to many guests that have said, when they've been in dark times, it's the rugby club that's got them up every morning. And I was just having a conversation just before this podcast about exactly the same thing. This rugby club gets people up and gets people going again. I love that.
Alex, obviously, met you, a while ago now in the, when you came in and delivered to some of the guys in the prison and stuff like that. And obviously straight away it was need to get Alex on a podcast, have a sort of, chat about this sort of stuff. And it has been amazing chatting to you because, obviously we've worked together a couple of times now and it's, we don't always get a chance to actually proper catch up, and it's good to find out a bit more about you. And, it just, I think your values as a person and all the good work you've done is just incredible, and really, really excited about seeing what you're going to do next, to be honest with you.
Oh, well, thanks very much for having me on, guys. I've loved it. It's been wicked.
And can you just remind us where people can find you if they're looking for your support as teams or individual athletes?
Sure. So the website is www.theachievingmind.co.uk, and then on Instagram it's The Achieving Mind, and the same on Twitter.
Fantastic. I urge anybody that's after some support, club, individually, age doesn't matter, whatever you're doing, get in touch with Alex. It's real beneficial, and like you said, Alex, so many clubs and sports now are starting to realize the importance, like you said about Dan Carter. Years ago it was, why are you going to see the sports psychologist? Now it's, why are you not going to see a sports psychologist? Both my sons are big into it. My Daniel's actually wants to go to Exeter next year and do psychology with sports and exercise science.
Oh, cool.
And my eldest is at Hartbury doing sports and exercise science at the moment, but he's a goalkeeper. Football, we won't talk about him anyway. So weird at the best of times. But no, thank you ever so much. Again, everybody, if you like what we do, please like, follow, share, tell people about what we're doing. But until next time, be more rugby. Thank you again, Jay.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks,
Thank
Alex.
you.
Been a pleasure.